Hello, everybody around the globe here. Good morning from New York. I'm Stefan Schweinfest, the Director of Statistics Division, and I'm here to welcome you all for this third virtual meeting of the United Nations Network on Economic Statisticians. The last time we met was in June, a couple of weeks or months ago. So in the meantime, we had our summer in the global north. So I hope some of you had time to step away from it all and come back refreshed with great ideas of what we can do and what we should do in this meeting. I'm personally also inspired by our summit that we had here last week. Some of you may have heard about it and seen it on the news with lots of heads of states and government descending upon us in New York. It's always a bit of a traffic mess, but I mean, it's also inspiring that we have this high level attention to our topic. And one of the topics was, of course, sustainable development. And even though the news in general terms is not good, there was one really big consensus that data and statistics are very, very important. And I can tell you, I've been here many, many years. I mean, we've gotten a lot more attention at this high political level than ever before. So what we are doing is clearly relevant, not only to monitor goals, but also really we are considered as a driver, as an enabler for the development agenda. So today we have the network meeting. I had a look at the agenda. There are some really exciting elements there. There is a keynote address. We will be talking about our program. The sprints are going very, very well. The preparation for statistical commission. And one topic that I'm always, of course, very passionate about is how can we help the global south? And we have had a very good consultation with regional commissions just recently, and the outcome was clearly that we have to pay attention. We have to continue to have to pay attention, focus to pay attention to building national statistical systems, because they are old challenges and new challenges. And I'm particularly excited about one feature that we have in this meeting, a live poll on this topic, on a number of the facets of this issue. And Andre, our chair, will elaborate on this in his remarks. So I'm really looking forward to this. Regarding our signature pieces, the sprint meetings, they are also going very, very well. This year's central theme, the GDP and beyond. We've had already 6 meetings, and some of them had over 200 participants, so which really shows that we are striking a live nerve, that lots of people and countries and systems are thinking about this. The seventh and final meeting will be soon on the 5th of October. So if you missed some of them, you can still connect at that moment, where we will be taking stock of what has been done and discussed in the 6 previous meetings, and what are concrete recommendations that we can take forward. And as soon as we have completed this round, we'll start a new round of sprints focusing on international statistical classifications. And I'm particularly pleased that here we, as a network with economic statisticians, have been working with the UN Committee of Experts on International Classifications. That was precisely one of the raison d'etres, that the network will help to connect dots and work with other partners. Classification is, of course, critically important. They are sort of the backbone and the spine of our statistical systems, and the national statistical offices around the world are very familiar with them. But there's still a lot to be discussed: new classifications, changes to classifications, modern ways of updating and implementing classifications, and using classifications as a tool for data integration. So that is particularly interesting, I find. And the first meeting of 3 that are planned for the time being is on the 25th of October, so all coming up. So if you have people, you are also our ambassadors to reach out to the world there, who want to connect to the network. you can point to our website or to our email address. Very simple network of economic statisticians, nes@un.org. If anybody wants to connect and have additional information, they are always welcome to write to us. One piece of housekeeping, we need to prepare a report to the forthcoming Statistical Commission in March 2024. We can have a bit of a discussion today or over the coming weeks, which are the topics that we want to get guidance from the Statistical Commission. I mean, we can report what we have done, that's part of the regular reporting, but we should also use the Statistical Commission as the executive body to perhaps give us guidance and give us some ideas or pointers and priorities for future activities and directions. This is all possible because there's a bureau very active in the background, and I would like to, I'm never getting tired of thanking everybody. There's Andre and Shahuda, our chairs from Canada and Maldives Bureau of Statistics. There's Indonesia, Statistics Netherlands, ONS from the UK, and the US Bureau of Economic Analysis. And of course, my team in UNSD, who work together and prepare all of these meetings. And Andre, particular thank you to you and Statistics Canada for making this meeting more exciting with the live poll that is coming up. And so I'm looking forward to this meeting, and I'm turning it over to you, Andre, as the legitimate chair of this whole network.
All right. Well, thank you, Stefan. And thank you all for joining us. This is the third quarterly meeting of the network, and or the third meeting of the network. We started these quarterly ones last June, as Stefan said. And thank you, Stefan, for those excellent opening remarks. I think you touched on a lot of key points that we'll sort of further expand today in our meeting. I want to thank the participants. I'd also like to thank the Bureau members, the members of the StatsCan team who are here, and the team, of course, from the UNSD, and in particular Benson, who makes all this possible. So through these quarterly meetings, we hope to share with you what we were doing and plans for upcoming events, and gather your input for how we are doing and topics of interest that we should tackle in the future. It's important that the network, which of course, as you know, has limited resources, actually has no resources, is more the right answer, that we focus on topics and items that are beneficial within our mandate to enable the statistical system to produce relevant information for decision makers. And to that effect, we will conduct a short poll today of 3 questions that aim to get a quick reading of your priorities and how the network should work to support you in addressing them. We'll go through the logistics of the live poll a little bit later in the meeting when Jessica from my office will walk us through the instructions. She's already loaded the QR code and the link to the Slido in the chat, so you can already sort of join in, although I don't think the questions are posted yet. But we'll get to that a little bit later in our meeting. At our last meeting, we presented you with the network's proposal for enhancing communication and relevance of the program. And part of our plan included regular quarterly meetings of the network, which feature a keynote presentation on topics of interest. So based on recent consultations, representatives from the Global South community identified alternative data, especially administrative data, as a priority topic of interest to them. So today we're fortunate to have Martin Alders, Director of Business Statistics in The Hague, who will provide an overview of alternative data sources that are used in business statistics in the Netherlands. He will go over the common steps in identifying and acquiring those data sources, and with special attention to the pros and cons associated with each of these data sources. So I think that'll be really interesting. Following the keynote address, I'll provide a bit of a recap in terms of the network's activities and make a few announcements regarding upcoming work. And finally, we'll have a discussion that summarizes recent discussions with the regional commissions on priorities of the Global South. So Ivo Havinga, although Ivo was having technical issues this morning, so it might just be Daniela Ravindra, who will take us through that segment of our agenda. This is where we'll also be conducting our live poll. So without further delay, Martin, the floor is yours. We have till about 7:40 for this item. So if you could do your presentation, and we'll try to give some time for discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your introduction. I've shared my screen. I hope it's visible for everyone. Okay. Introduction, my name is Maarten Alders. I'm Director of Business Statistics in the Netherlands. My department is mainly involved with the structural business statistics, short-term statistics, and some other statistics like housing prices. As mentioned, I will give a broad overview. I will not go into much detail, but I want to mention different aspects of using alternative data sources. A small outline. I will go into what I mean with these alternative data sources, what you have to do to receive these data, and what you have to do to process this data into statistics. I will also tell you something about our next steps, and I will end in the form of a summary of pros and cons. But let's start what I mean with alternative data sources. And I don't want to have a very thorough discussion, but for this presentation, it's just any data source that's not the result of a survey. And we use a lot of data sources in the Netherlands. For internal use, we have a catalog of all data sources that we use in our statistical office. And I checked it last week. At the moment, we have 234 data sources that we actually use in our production of statistics. And all kinds of data sources included: administrations, registrations, scanner data, data sources that you might label as big data. And in this catalog, you can expect the obvious data sources like population register, all kinds of healthcare data, data on education, social security, etc. And of course, a lot of data sources that can be useful for making business statistics. And these are some examples that I just picked from our catalog, and it's semi-random because I think it gives a good insight in the type of data sources that we use. Starting with cleared goods at seaports that we receive from customs, a lot of information on real estate from the land registry office. Of course, a whole lot of information from the tax administration, information about turnover tax, payroll taxes, etc., etc. Subsidies received by companies. Also, a lot of information about incomes and social benefits of people. So that contains, for instance, a lot of information about employees. Scanner data from supermarkets and other retail stores. And a totally different example, information that we receive from the Dutch courts, and that contains information about companies that are declared bankrupt. And the next slide is just a simple example, which displays the number of bankruptcies on a monthly basis, where the data suppliers are the Dutch courts. And this is information that we receive on a daily basis. And it's delivered to us electronically. And you see here the period during the COVID crisis. And during this COVID crisis, we were able to publish this data not on a monthly basis, but even on a weekly basis, because we had this data source available. And one of the expectations was that the number of bankruptcies would explode due to corona crisis. And as you can see here, that was not actually the case. So that's a good starting point for some more research on that. I will come to that in a moment. Well, what do you have to do when you want to use alternative data sources? Well, it starts with the scouting process. Which data sources are available in a country that can be useful for compiling statistics? Next step is that you must have legal access to these data sources. The data supplier must have a legal base to supply the data, and we as a statistical office must have a legal base to receive this data. For some data sources, the public consent is very important. For instance, if you look at healthcare data, there might be some public discussions on whether or not people or the public consent is that you can distribute these data among governmental institutions. Once you have scouted these data sources, you have to make arrangement with the data holders on the delivery of the data. You have to make arrangement about the timing, the contents, the specifications, and so on. And for that, you need a good relationship with these data suppliers. Well, if you look at the situation in the Netherlands, we have a very strong Statistics Netherlands Act from 1996, and it contains a lot of articles. And there are two important things that I want to point out here. One is that we are required to reduce the administrative burden to a minimum. So we are required to use alternative data sources as much as possible in order to reduce the administrative burden. And in order to do so, we are permitted access to all registered data sources that are kept by the government. So that's a very good starting point. But that's not enough, because it's not the case that I can just call our tax administration and say, listen, I have this law in hand, and can you give me next month this and this data sources? You have to build relationships. And for instance, with the tax administration and other data holders, we have long-term relationships with these data holders, and we have these relations on all levels in the organization. Also, our top management is involved in this relationship with these important data holders. Well, once you have said that, it's about receiving the data. So aspects like inspecting the data and the metadata especially is very important, because then the processing of the data starts. Usually when you have a survey, you can determine very specifically what's the data you need, what are the specifications. You put it in a questionnaire, you receive the information, and you process it. When you are processing administrations and registrations, none of these administrations has the sole purpose to satisfy statistics. So you have to do a lot of work to transform this administrative data to statistics. And there might be a lot of issues. For example, population issues, there might be the case of overcoverage, undercoverage in your administration. There might be issues with your variables, that some variables in the administration are of poor quality, or you have to integrate several variables into one statistical variable. There might be issues with period. For example, the administration is organized by a 4-week period, while you want to make statistics on a monthly basis. And all kinds of things that are involved, and you have to apply a lot of methodology to process the data into proper statistics. Another important aspect is that these data sources must contain a unique identifier, because in one specific data source, the number of variables is very limited. And it's more powerful if you can connect these data sources or link these data sources to each other. So that leads to more rich information about, in our case, companies. And that brings us to the business register. So in Statistics Netherlands, we have a business register where all these data sources are connected, made linkable to each other. And there's a mandatory use of the statistical units and the characteristics of this business register in our statistical process. In general, you can say that for small and medium enterprises, administrative data is leading, while for the largest and most complex enterprises, survey data is more important, because of the weight of these enterprises in the economy, we really must make sure that the information is proper. So that means that we also have to use survey data. For the largest enterprise groups, the structure and data is made consistent in terms of the structure of the companies, the enterprise groups, and in terms of the most important economic variables. And of course, this business register contains all kinds of reporting facilities. Well, let's get back to bankruptcies. This is the type of information that we can make if we solely base on the information from the Dutch courts. But when we can link this information with other data sources through our business register, we can make all kinds of distinctions. These are two examples. We can distinguish bankruptcies by sector or branch. We can distinguish it by region. You can distinguish information by the number of employees, and so on and so on. So I think this is very simple and illustrative example of the power of linking these alternative data sources through the business register. So we have a long-term experience in using these kind of administrations and registrations. But we are looking forward. Some noise on the background. Yes, thank you. Because what we see is there are more and more data sources becoming available, and we are constantly seeking new data sources to help us in making statistics. And what we see is that more and more data sources are held by private companies. So we have our law on statistics, which grants us access to administrations held by the government, but not administrations and registrations held by private companies. Also, we want to make first steps in connecting system to system. How can we retrieve data from the administration of companies without bothering them? And there are more and more statistical techniques to compile statistics from all these data sources. With these next steps, new issues arise. As I mentioned, more and more data sources are held by private companies, and there's not sufficient legislation on that at the moment. And with these new data sources like telecom data or Earth observation data, these data sources are even less design quoted for statistics than administrative data. So that requires more and new techniques like machine learning techniques. Well, two examples I want to mention. The first one is an example that we already realized, but I think it's worth mentioning here. Up to 3 years ago, many employees visited shops and supermarkets to know prices, and that was the information we need for the inflation rate, for the commercial price index. But in the meantime, we receive from more than 2,000 retailers and supermarkets, we receive scanner data. And we can use this scanner data to as input for our CPI. So that means that the last 3 years, we are not visiting any shop or supermarket anymore. And that was a huge step, which is a clear illustration that you can use alternative data sources and also reduce the administrative burden. Another example is in the field of big data and machine learning. We are interested in the number of innovative companies. Well, there is a survey for that purpose, the Community Innovation Survey, the CIS, but that's only held for companies with 10 employees or more. So that means that you miss the small companies, and especially you miss the startups. So what we did is using text analysis of websites with keywords, and we developed a model that can determine or estimate whether or not a company is an innovative company or not, based on the text on websites. Well, on this slide, I've included a link to the source. That's an elaborative article. And I also included a small part of the table of contents, because that illustrates the type of research you have to do. Because it goes about URL finding, web scraping, variable selection, but also analyzing model stability. And can you make a proper statistical process properly modeled so that you can use this information to compile proper statistics. Well, if we look at our long-term experience, what we see is that when using all these data sources, that we have much more information at hand, more variables that enables us to make richer publications, especially when you can link all these data sources. we have indeed reduced data collection cost and response burden, because you have so many variables and you have information about much more companies than when you are sending out surveys. The output granularity increases. And not always, but sometimes you can make more up-to-date publications, as I showed with this information on bankruptcy. But there are also cases when the administrative data is later available than when you should have sent out a questionnaire. Of course, there are also cons, and these are not only disadvantages, but rather things to keep in mind when you start using alternative data sources. As I mentioned, there must be suitable legislation that gains you legal access to this data. You really must have a good relation with the data owner. There are all kinds of risk involved, because when you send out a questionnaire, you are in control by yourself. And when you use these data sources, you are dependent on other institutes. Alternative data sources have their own purpose, and that purpose is not making statistics. So methods are needed to transform this data into statistical output. In some cases, you have to really validate the outcomes, because it's administration were not really designed for statistics. So you have to do a very thorough validation process. And if you look in the long run, what we see is that the knowledge that is required by our employees has changed. The type of research we are doing now and the processing of these large data sets requires other knowledge, other qualifications than when you send out questionnaires and process that information. Well, that brings me to our final sheet, because as I've mentioned, it's very important that you have unique identifiers in your data sources. So therefore, I want to make you aware of this series of webinars that will be organized by the UNSD and the other organizations that you can read here. And the goal of this webinar series is to create awareness of the importance of global unique identifiers. These webinars are held in October, November, and December. So if you want to join, I think you can contact this organization. And that brings me to my final sheet. Thank you very much. I think I can close my presentation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you very much. That was a really informative presentation. So we do have about 10 minutes or so for questions. If you have any questions for Anders, please raise your hand and we'll cycle through the questions. I see no questions, so maybe I'll break the ice. Oh, Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, Yusuf, and I'll jump in after if there are no other questions.
Thank you so much. Happy to be in this meeting. Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. First question about the CPI, a price statistic, I mean. Just if you give us just more details, the way, because in Oman we use link to link, I mean, link between our statistic office to the hypermarket database. In this way, we push and pull the data between the center and also the hypermarkets. In this way, we deal maybe more than 5 years, we use this technique. But maybe, as you mentioned, you have a different experience in this. Maybe we need a little bit more details. If it's not today, maybe later on. And also regarding the household information of household survey, do you have any new technique we use it rather than use the traditional way that we have to visit the family to get the expenditure? Because by using the administration data, easy to get income in-house, but still there is some challenge to get the expenditure for the family. Maybe if you have any experience in this area. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to answer these questions. As I mentioned, I gave a broad overview, and I'm not the expert on all the topics I mentioned today. Regarding the CPI, I don't know if I understood you correctly. But we have really built relationships with the largest supermarkets in the Netherlands, and we have made arrangements with them that they send us the scanner data electronically. And that was not a process that we finished in 1 month. That was a process of years. We have more information available about this process and the CPI also in English on our website. So I can suggest that we can send you some additional information about how we did that. The other topic was the household survey. I don't know if you mean the labor force survey, but if we look at our statistics, for example, for income, we use all kind of data from the tax administration. Of course, we have surveys in the Netherlands where we visit households, but to give you an example, if we look at our census, that's done completely by these alternative data sources. So when we have a census, we do not visit households anymore. And also about this, we have a lot of information available, but also with these kind of statistics, we use a lot of administrative data sources, especially the population register. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Why don't we go to Richard?
Thank you. And I think this probably follows on from the last question. You talked in your slides about the legislative requirements you had to access private sector data. But in your last answer, and actually thinking about the UK experience, a lot of accessing private sector data we find to be about how you build the partnerships and the relationships. So I was wondering if you could say a bit more about what you think the legislative barriers are, if you've seen any examples of good practice that you're looking to follow, and how you're bringing that partnership working that you just described there with in that last example, what role that plays as well. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. That's a very general question. And if you look, we have so many data holders, and with each data holder, the situation is different. With some data holders, it is a very smooth process. And with other data holders, it's a process that took years. And it's always the case, even if we say, well, we have a Statistics Netherlands law, and the other institutions also have their laws. So sometimes it's a more juridical discussion which law prevails, for example. And it's always good to emphasize on the benefits for both parties. For example, if you look at the supermarkets, the benefit for the supermarkets is that we won't visit them anymore. So they send them the files, and they won't be bothered with our employees entering their stores. And if you look at the tax administration, we have very intensive relationship. We have quarterly meetings with even top management involved, and that's really necessary because you are working together as two institutes with different cultures, different goals, different strategies. So in general, it's a long-term commitment that you want to strive at. So it's a very general answer, but that's our experience. It depends on the data holder, how smoothly it goes or not.
Looking for other questions. So if you do have other questions for Martin, please raise your hand. If not, I'll jump in with one. I think I'll do that because I don't see any more hands. In one of your slides, you it was the bubble chart, I think, or the flow. You had a bubble related to public consent. And I just wanted you to expand a little bit on that. So is a condition of using a particular administrative data source that you get consent from the entities that are in it? Is that what I understood?
No, it's not. It's not a
okay.
condition, but we cannot ignore it.
Okay.
I think that's what I want to mention. For example, I'm not very involved in this topic, but one of the examples is during COVID crisis, and people were getting vaccines, and there was huge demand of information about the effectiveness of that. So the question was, can these data be shared with our statistical office? And there was a strong public consent, and that determined to some extent the outcomes. So it's something that we cannot ignore, public consent.
So yeah, so in this context, it's more about acceptability, and then sort of how society views the particular use. So bringing in sort of the ethical use of data and all those interesting topics.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And do you have a framework for deciding on that?
For deciding on using data sources?
Yeah. So if you think that there's a particular source that could be interesting for the statistical program, but it's a source that could be controversial in terms of its use, what process do you go through in your organization to sort of determine whether or not to actually bring that data in?
Yes. For example, we do privacy impact assessments.
Okay.
If data sources contain personal information. So we have a few of these elements that we have to do and fulfill before we actually gain access to these data sources.
Okay.
So it always starts with the process of contacting the data holder and see if there's, yes.
Okay, great. Maybe we have time for one more question, and then we'll move on to our next topic. So seeing none, I'd like to thank you, Martin. This was a really good presentation, and we, of course, we'll take a look at it. Thank you for the links, and of course, for everybody on the line, if you want more information, I think a lot of that information is on your website. So,
yes.
So thank you very much.
Okay. You're welcome. Thank you.
So let's now move on to our next scheduled item on the agenda, which is yours truly, providing a recap of network activities and so on. So, Sylvie, if you could share my slides, that would be appreciated. And there we go. And maybe we can just go to slide 1. Again, I'll provide a quick recap, and then we will have time for a little bit of a discussion if needed. So, as a bureau, we've really thought about using an agile approach to really bring high-level statistical priority issues, bringing in the key players, and really having a conversation about sort of where the statistical programs are going. So we were thinking about academia, the private sector, national statistical organizations, and so on. So we're trying to bring all this together, and we do that as you've seen through some sprints that we've done. Our sprints have been very popular. We're going to talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. The Beyond GDP sprints are super well attended. We've also done sprints on owner-occupied housing in the CPI, and we've done sprints on data access. And certainly moving forward, we're thinking of a whole bunch of new other sprints. When we think about priorities, we think about, of course, we want to zone in on the priorities that that are top of mind for the Statistical Commission. So last year we produced a synthesis report, which was basically combing through all of the Statistical Commission documents and really teasing out, the similarities, the commonalities, and similar priorities. And we identified that data integration, coordination between regional commissions, and international standards and classifications were always sort of top of mind in terms of all the statistical reports. So moving forward, we decided that, well, you know, as a network, if these are the priorities of the Statistical Commission and the statistical ecosystem, then we should probably look at these priorities. So again, we've had a series of sprints. In terms of this particular meeting, we thought that we would, rather than just have basically a recap of events like I'm doing now, which is interesting, but not as interesting as it could be. We decided to add keynote speakers to the sessions, and I think this has been really useful. We just had a really interesting presentation on administrative data, so we'll continue to do this quarterly and have keynote speakers. And many of you have actually volunteered topics for future keynote speakers, so that's been really good. Of course, we do a lot of consultation. In particular, this year we did a lot of consultation with the directors of statistical divisions in regional commissions, and of course with regional expert committees and statistical groups to really sort of get at what the priorities are. The network is relatively new in terms of the statistical system, and we're really wanting to elevate the awareness of the network and its activities. So we're working really closely with a variety of different stakeholders, from academics to the private sector, to make sure that that there's knowledge of network activities, and that we're an active group that can contribute. So to every extent possible, we participated at various meetings, you know, such as the UN Committee of Experts on Economic and Trade Statistics, the Intersecretariat Working Group on National Accounts, the Committee of Experts on Environmental and Economic Accounting, the Committee of Experts on Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics, as well as the Working Group on Data Stewardship. So we're really consulting and trying to integrate ourselves in that space. And we continue with informal and formal meetings with regional commissions. So next slide, please. In our work plan as well, we wanted to improve information transfer, so sharing the findings of the network with stakeholders and so on. So so again, we've organized these quarterly meetings. We try to, as well, every time we have a sprint now, we summarize the session and we post a summary on the website. The website is a really interesting tool because it has all of the network activities really well managed, really well organized, and anything that we've done as a network, with some delay, I suppose, is posted on the website. And of course, last year we organized two in-person side events. One, you know, at the UN Statistical Commission, and the other one at the Global Forum on the future of economic statistics, that was in Brussels. So again, we try to have these in-person meetings when we can, where opportunity arises. So we're still going to try to do that this year. And of course, you know, particular focus, particularly in this meeting as well, is really the we want to improve the relevance of the network, in particular for the Global South, and we certainly want to sort of factor in the priorities of the Global South in our work. So next slide, please. So activity since the last quarterly meeting. Well, we started our second Beyond GDP Sprint series. Again, if you're interested in anything related to Beyond GDP, all of our first sprint is well documented on the website, and the events that we've had so far in terms of the second sprint series are also on the website. So we've had 3 webinars that took place in June. The first session, or since June, the first session explored initiatives to measure and monitor inclusive and sustainable well-being and the quality of life. Second webinar provided a picture of key advances with respect to measuring well-being and showcased examples of combining existing metrics to track well-being. The third session tackled progress and development made with relation to ESG, so environmental, social, and governance performance. Next slide, please. The fourth webinar provided examples of the current state of domestic well-being dashboards, their uses, and impact on policymaking. The fifth session covered synergies among differential distribution frameworks used for measuring economic inequality. And the second to last meeting discussed relative benefits and trade-offs between dashboards and composite indices. The sessions were really well attended, generated a lot of interest. I think some sessions had upwards of 200-300 participants. From my perspective, in sort of participating in many of these events through my career, I find that the GDP sprints are one of the better well-attended statistical events that I've seen anyway. So it's really interesting that we can generate that much interest from an audience perspective, but also from a participant perspective. Kudos to kudos to Richard and his team for organizing the sprints, because we've been able to generate a lot of really good discussion, a lot of really key, really interesting participants, and the sprints have really been a success. If you've missed the latest Beyond GDP sprint, the next session will provide a recap of the previous 6 meetings, the issues discussed, and so on. So if you didn't have a chance to sort of participate in any of the first 6 sprints, you should not miss the next webinar, which I believe is next week, or first week of October. So keep an eye out for that. Next slide, please. So we've talked a lot about Beyond GDP. Another interesting topic that we're tackling with our sprints are classifications. So jointly with the UN Committee of Experts on International Statistical Classifications, we're creating a series of sprints. The objectives of the sprints are to raise awareness of the importance of international classifications for both internal and external users, to advance outreach by the Committee of Experts and to engage national statistical offices, to provide an additional forum for discussing ways to modernize methods for updating and implementing classifications, and again to highlight the importance of investing in classification work as foundation for data integration. The target audience of the sprints are obviously the members of this network and members of the Committee of Experts on International Statistical Classifications. We're targeting chief statisticians of NSOs, and of course any expert group specific to a domain, and of course any stakeholders such as private sector users. So we're hopeful that that we'll have as much buy-in as we had for the Beyond GDP sprints. Next slide, please. So we have 3 webinars planned. The first one at the end of October, on October 25th, which will really focus on statistical classification as a foundational piece for data integration. The next sprint in November will discuss the mechanisms for rendering the classification process more efficient. I think this will be a really important one. I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully some good ideas will come out of that. If it's one thing that being in economic statistics for most of my career, one thing that I've noticed is that it's really difficult to stay relevant if the classifications don't evolve quickly. So we need to sort of speed up that process to be more responsive to statistical users. So again, really key webinar there. And of course, the role of technology and classification on January 31st. So I think you should have already received the invites for this meeting. If not, please reach out to Benson. The details are also on the website. So if you're interested, please don't hesitate. And for registration information, again, you can click the link on the slide there. So next slide, please. One of the roles of the network is really to reach out and collaborate with other statistical bodies and working groups and so on. The network has I think made a lot of inroads with respect to the beyond GDP sprints with some of these other groups. We've made, we're trying to make really close links as well with the new Friends of the Chair on social and demographic statistics. As we know, when we think about the work of the Statistical Commission and focusing forward, it's increasingly about the triangulation of economic statistics, environmental statistics, and social statistics. And much the same way that the UN created the Friends of the Chair on economic statistics a few years ago, which led to the creation of the Network of Economic Statisticians. Last year, they launched Friends of the Chair on social and demographic statistics, and the network has worked really closely with the Friends of the Chair on social and demographic statistics. Richard and I met with folks from the network to start making those links and creating those bridges. I met with them a second time related to environmental statistics. Of course, the Beyond GDP sprints have highlighted the work of the Friends of the Chair. And again, we're really trying to sort of make those links a little bit more tangible as sort of the Friends of the Chair social evolves and sort of tries to move its program forward. Next slide, please. Priorities, priorities, priorities. We're always sort of trying to focus on what the priorities are, and to that extent, members of our bureau did a lot of consultation with regional commissions. Again, with the aim to improve the relevance of the network for the Global South. And we're going to talk about sort of what we heard in those sessions and outcomes in the next presentation. So of course, we want to stay relevant, so we need your feedback and your input on the topics we've chosen. Also, again, the network is relatively new. We're finding our way in terms of communicating and so on. So are we effective as a group in terms of event organization, and sort of are we making a contribution, and are we making a difference? And of course, coherence is another key thing that we think about. Does our work fit in with the rest of the work of the statistical community? We actively try to minimize the overlap in terms of the things that we do, but is the work program that we've undertaken actually relevant and coherent with other work that's happening? Next slide, please. So I'll stop here. We don't have a lot of time for questions because I went a little bit over what I planned to say. But if there are any questions, we can take a few and then move on to our next session. Hopefully I wasn't on mute. Okay, so seeing no questions, let's then move right in. Oh, Wafa, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Andre, and we're glad that the progress has been fantastic with the work of everybody in this task. I just want to note two things. We need to do more national events on this, and one example is what the UK is doing now on beyond GDP on the different subjects of the sprints, and we are ready to support. I think Yusuf is with us here from the Arab region, and it's important to raise awareness and speak, how much the network is working and the update of the SNA can bring to policymakers. So this is something that we stand by countries if they want to prepare any event nationally. And just the second also point, we raised concerns that policymakers, heads of organizations are seeing that technology can replace a lot of the work that economic statisticians are doing. Just to say that we have to stick to the foundation that technology and all that cannot replace the foundational work that economic statisticians are doing. So this I just have to put in front of the network, so the regional commissions and the global south stay relevant in what needs to be done in the future. Thank you, Andre.
Well, thanks for those comments. Certainly from as co-chair of the network, if any country wants to organize national events, happy to participate and sort of discuss the network's activities at those events. So if countries want to do that, we're happy to sort of help organize and participate. Are there any other questions? I don't see any. So why don't we, for the sake of time and efficient meetings, just go right to our next item. So we have Ivo. Hi, Ivo. How are you?
I'm good.
And Daniela. So they're going to give us a summary of the priorities identified during their discussions with the regional commissions. So over to you, Ivo.
Thank you. I just want to check whether the sound is coming through. Yeah.
You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay. I was a bit hampered this morning. I had the shock of my life. My computer didn't start up. So that's always the shock of somebody that likes to work, not able to work. But iPhones do help out. So I'm happy to join, although I was a few minutes late to actually make the connection. Thank you for this opportunity. And as you indicated, Andre, this is a presentation together that Danielle and I do, which basically came forward of our dialogue with the regional commissions that we held in the summer. And actually we talked with 4 of them that we had the opportunity to share with the directors their opinion about how we could actually tap into the interest and priorities of the Global South. So it was with the African Commission, it was with the Latin American and the Caribbean Commission, it was with Wafa, was on the phone, for the West Asia, let's say the Middle East and Arab region, and then we had also for Asia and the Pacific, we had the joining to actually get their views as well. So these were this basically is a presentation around the outcome. Daniela will talk about the outcome, but I will make it some sort of introduction that we made towards this conversation and the preparations that we made, so that you have a bit of a sense of the preparations that goes into these discussions, which were quite lengthy, apart from discussion also with the Bureau of which directions to take. Next slide, Benson, and thank you for helping me out here. Now, the first one that I want to talk is about the role of the network. Although Andre, of course, brought that out, I just want to remind ourselves what role we have when we talk about taking global priorities forward for the South. I very much was taken by the initial discussion of the Friends of the Chair, which was very much around issues of the relevance and responsiveness of the statistical system, and particularly the global one, but also guiding the responsiveness of the regional and the national system. So that was it. It was basically a discussion about the fit for purpose, which I think is a very important sort of element of quality, to look at yourself and say to yourself, are we really doing the right thing? And can we do it better? Particularly, it played into the COVID sort of development that we then had, and also see, the expansive role of the National Statistical Office, and also the expansive role of the regional and the global institutions in supporting the governments in providing a responsive and relevant sort of actions. We came up with three areas that we thought was very important, and I think there's still a good outcome of the discussion. Now, briefly, networking and user consultation. So the essential element is that we look at partnerships in this work and coordinating that partnership and bringing new elements to the fore. One of the things that was very much sort of felt was also that we had to look across the various domains, economic, social, and the environment, but from an economic statistics perspective, so to strengthen that role, which is very much now also picked up at the international level at the UN in the discussion about GDP and beyond. It was also important to deepen specific dialogues that we could promote the discussion more clearly, more broadly out of across domain sort of activity, like for instance, access to privately held data and data sources, but it's also now around classification, that we highlight some of these discussions. And these developments are, I think, a good one is that we partner with different UN committees of experts to actually highlight their program and bring it much to the fore in a broader sort of discussions around these particular issues that they're working on. And they come at the request of these committees to actually work with them and to deepen it. And some of them were already mentioned by André of a more broader sort of discussion about networking and user consultation. I should not forget the network actually makes a deliberate attempt to bring in, let's say, the users of statistics more deliberately. So it's not only with the statistician, we also really, advocate for the connection with the academia. So we're looking to that in a more broader sense, because we think the academia can bring a substantive amount of knowledge to the discussion on statistics, and of course also with policymakers. So there you have, and for instance, the keynotes that we try to bring forward is a reflection of that work to bring much more to the fore the different sort of uses that we want to engage. Quickly to transformation of the statistical infrastructure and operations and data solutions. Here we have work done, and we are continuing to do, working with, for instance, the Committee on Big Data and Data Science about new data and the use of new data, but also about access to privately held data. So we're working on that also and find use cases that would be inspiration for others to look at. And the last one is enabling new institutional arrangement and governance, which has to do with, and I think the network has brought that to the fore, that in addressing these issues, we like to approach it through an agile method, more sort of new management sort of environment, bringing in a short time some very clear priorities to the fore. But we use, for instance, the element of sprints, which is a new way of looking at advancing some of the issues that have been identified going forward. Also, we make a lot of attempt in working with the different, and I mentioned that the different committee of experts, and also either individually or collectively of bringing this all forward. Now, I said D3 brings out to the fore work stream. The main sort of, let's say, focus that we have is around integrated data and integrated statistics, and developing, these and advancing the dialogue on the discussions that take place on the different sort of new methods and technologies and frameworks. Next slide, Vincent. Now, when we started the discussion with the regional commissions on the option for the Global South, we looked at three elements. One was more statistical sort of technique issues. Would they prefer that? Would they prefer a more policy-oriented sort of approach? And I'll talk a little bit about that. And were there other issues that had to do with modernization? Now, if you think about the policy issues, there's a wide sort of set of priorities that they have in the Global South that really play into their statistical program. I just briefly mentioned a few. One is on economic growth and inequality. It is about integrated trade and regional integration, but also about issues that are very much for the fore at the moment, also in the regional commissions and at the country level. It's about well-being and inclusiveness, where you have this issue about bringing much more data about social conditions of people. So it's a much more people-centered sort of statistics. But at the same time, there are issues in the developing countries that are very important in terms of employment, like the informal sector, the agriculture has to be understood. Food security is, of course, still a major issue that needs to be looked at. But also there is, in the developing world, a considerable issue around safety and security. There's also a whole discussion about young statehood and the development of governance and eradicating corruption. And of course, there's a lot of influence on technology and innovation. So it's a broad palette from which we could paint, but we cannot do everything. So, there's others that pick up other things, but where's the network the most useful to think about these policy elements? And then you can look at technical issues about integration of data, new data collection techniques, accessibility and sharing of data, data security and privacy. We could also, think about user engagement and, of course, capacity building more in general. So there are general issues that come to bear that we needed to discuss to see among this broad palette, what do we paint next year and what is productive to paint to play into these situations. Wafa, I really enjoy it. If we can find together with these members that are on the call now, and that is very important, that we can then translate the work that we do at the global level, building on what you find at the regional and at the national level. So it would be much more, a dialogue between the national, regional, and the global level, which I think we all inspire to have a much more sort of seamless discussion, as we know that although we try very hard, and Stefan knows, I know how hard he works on it, to actually bring the relationships and the issues that are playing out at the national, regional level to the global level. So it would help him also at the Commission to organize an agenda that plays into this. So, and the network, I think, can play a role. Next slide, Bent. What are then the discussions to move the priorities forward? And this is my last slide, and then I pass on to Daniela to give you a few insight of where we are now in discussion. But this is not the final discussion. This is really brought to you to think and help us to actually set the priorities that is in the interest of the membership, but also more broadly for the fit for purpose international community. So, today in the red, it says very clearly, we're going to present what we found. So it's a discussion with the network members. We will also start thinking about, the consultation with the regional commissions, which we had, and bring that back to the regional commission, deepen maybe the dialogue based on your guidance that you will receive today. And of course, the Bureau members play a role in our discussion internally, because basically they're a reflection of what the network members has told the Bureau to do. So in that sense, it is a sort of executive arm of the network and the thoughts of the members. And hopefully we can come up with a short list. Let me remind you, we have to come up with a short list because we hopefully will be able to present the paper to the Commission, the report, where we'll have to set out these priorities. So your advice and guidance on these priorities, particularly for the Global South and the importance of these issues, as I mentioned, taking forward is essential now at this stage of our planning for next year and beyond. Daniela, I made the introduction. Please take over on the next slide. Benson, I think you can turn to the next slide, and I stop here. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Ivo, and good morning, everyone. At least good morning from where I am. I'm Daniela Ravindra, and I'm with Statistics Canada. As you heard, Ivo talked about the high-level role of the network, as well as the context for the prioritization of work by the Global South. Although I think that this logic applies very well to all statistical organizations. We decided to focus here on the Global South simply because we wanted to ensure that issues that are particular to these regions, which do not always make it to the list of top common issues brought up by NSOs, are not overlooked by the network. So as Ivo mentioned, last July, we met with a number of representatives of regional commissions. And this is actually the second meeting that we've had, because we've had a set of consultations in 2022, but we wanted to make sure that we stay on top of things. So we had this meeting in just last July. Some of you, as it was mentioned, were part of the discussions. And here I just want to speak about what we heard from those who participated, and also go over a few actions that the network has already taken following that meeting. This is really key here, because really the whole discussion is about how the network can help support the Global South, and hopefully we can have a good discussion on this after the presentation. So there were a few high-level priorities that were brought up by the participants in the consultation. Economic growth was top of mind. A lot of the NSOs that are part of the Global South are still grappling with the implementation of the 2008 SNA. So, and in that context, they're looking at the development of methods and strategies to map data and integrate data sources, so that they could develop information that supports the 2008 SNA. And that's especially in the case of NSOs that don't have a lot of regular surveys that feed into their SNA framework. National cohesion and well-being also came up, but really, and this is part of our Beyond GDP series that Andre referenced, but these topics are more on the aspirational goal category, I would say, because as I mentioned, if the focus is still on the implementation of 2008 SNA, looking at topics such as well-being and cohesion is maybe tier 2 priority for some of these offices. The development of some national GDP indicators came up as well, and that's of course to give policy makers and other users good information on how different regions of the countries are doing and how they can target policies to these regions. Regional integration and participation in global value chains also came up in the discussion. And again, here, the important point that was made is the required statistics that need to be developed on global value chains, and as well as trading value added. Again, and you'll see a bit of a common theme here. People talked about the need to learn from more advanced statistical offices practices that they could adopt on data mapping for compilation of international trade statistics, as well as supply use tables. International price comparison as well as price stability came up, and here a bit like the presentation that was done by Martin as the keynote, the people wanted to understand and learn methodologies on accessing scanner data, web scraping techniques, again, because a lot of these NSOs don't necessarily have well-established surveys that collect prices. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Benson. The informal economy came up, and there's no surprise here. This is such an important component of economic activity in many of the countries in the Global South regions, and it's also a notoriously difficult to measure phenomenon, given the lack of formal reporting. Because by definition, it is an informal economy. So one of the best options is to tap into big data generated by transactions from both those providing goods and services in the informal economy, as well as those consuming them. But that requires know-how and experience, and this is where the network could play a role in helping establish collaborations between NSIs that have this type of experience and those without, or organizing events that showcase successful work already done in this area. Next slide, please, Benson. So really, achieving some of these priorities requires an evolution, or some call it a modernization of the statistical system. Um, NSOs need to move from producing and publishing information on disparate topics to actually data integration techniques, where we combine data from various sources to publish new indicators, or where we're able to consolidate information from multiple data sources into one data repository to enable users to do analysis and reporting. Capacity building and training. This is something that came up this time as well as in 2022, and it was one of the things that I know is top of mind for NSOs in the Global South. And of course, it's related to what I was just talking about, learning new techniques, knowledge sharing, and so on. Um, and it is understandable why many of the NSOs represented there which are small and lack resources either to train people or to recruit specialized personnel. So this is why capacity building and training is important for them. The network does not really have capacity building resources, as Andre sort of jokingly said. We're not really funded per se for this. However, we can support training through our sprints, where we invite a very diverse group of speakers, including academia and private sector representatives. And these sprints could be an opportunity for participants to learn about work being done in academia and the private sector, as well as other NSOs, and reach out to these presenters to see if there are further opportunities to work with them on training workshops, collaboration, and knowledge sharing. So, I think the sprints are an opportunity for participants to tap into the knowledge that is out there and perhaps forge partnerships. So I would also invite you after this presentation to let us know, either today in the discussion part of this session, but also later to email, if you find that the sprints provide that opportunity to learn and to perhaps collaborate. Next slide, please, Benson. So one of the most important roles of the network, and Ivo mentioned that, is to enable knowledge sharing and collaboration. So the network has, at the meetings that we had with participants last July, we were made aware that there were a lot of well-established regional knowledge sharing platforms, like there are many seminars that go on a regular basis, stats cafes, and conferences. And the network was invited to participate at some of these fora to, first of all, to stay informed of the preoccupations of the participants, and also take this information into account when we're organizing network events and activities, as well as when we prepare recommendations for further work. We've taken this invitation to heart, and in October, Andre is going to be presenting at the upcoming ECLAC Conference of the Americas. As well, at today's quarterly meeting, as you saw, we had a keynote speaker which discussed the topic of leveraging administrative and big data, which is one of the things that came up at these discussions. So representatives of regional commissions have also provided us with suggested keynote speakers. Andre mentioned that, and we will endeavor to invite some of those speakers at future quarterly meetings, because they are topics of interest to the Global South. The other thing that was mentioned where the network would play a role is to facilitate sort of twinning or formation of partnerships between NSOs that have expertise in an area and NSOs that would like to gain that expertise. So a few examples here, but they're by no means exhaustive, was Statistics Canada, which has a lot of experience in purchasing power parities to work with the Caribbean NSOs, the ONS, which has done a lot of work on scanner data and data science to work perhaps with some of the African NSOs. And then also, they mentioned that we should assist them in identification of specific expertise in the topic of harmonization of classifications. And there, as Andre mentioned, we are organizing international classification sprint that's coming up soon. So, and we have a lot of people already registered. So I think there's a lot of interest in that. Last but not least, this is actually an issue that the network has been aware of, and we are working hard to mitigate, is to ensure better representation of the Global South in the network. So what we have done is after the consultation meeting, we have reached out to Indonesia as well as to Brazil. And I'm glad to report that an Indonesian representative, Hadi, is part of the Bureau now, and that Brazil has joined the network. So this will improve our representation of the region in the network. And with Hadi as part of the Bureau, I think we'll have better input for planning our future activities. So this concludes my presentation. Before we go to Q&A, I think I'm going to pass it on to Jessica, who is going to walk you guys through the poll that we're going to administer. Over to you,
Super.
Jessica.
Thanks, Daniela. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all. If you haven't already had the opportunity to do so, I'll need you to join the Slido live poll. I've posted the link in the chat again. I will also share my screen where you will see a handy QR code that you can also use to join via your mobile device. So we have 3 questions this morning. You'll see the results generate live on your screen, and hopefully we'll have time to review them a bit with Andre before the end of the meeting. So without further ado, while people are logging in, I have launched the first poll question, and you will have the ability to select as many answers as you deem appropriate. Please make sure as well when you log in, you're in the poll view of Slido and not the Q&A view.
So Jess, how long do we stay on the
So
questions?
I'm watching. We have 7 responses so far, and I'm
Okay.
anticipating around about 20 probably.
Okay. So given the our meeting's almost over, not sure that we're going to have time to have a profound conversation on Daniela and Ivo's presentation. But while we do the poll, if anybody wants to jump in with a question, I think that would be acceptable at this point. So if you do have a question, so Wafa, you have your hand up, so why don't you go ahead? And Yusuf
Yes.
has a question as well.
So maybe for me, it's just about these regional priorities and, for example, the price stability. It's important to link it to poverty measures, well-being, the maximum we want. And that's why we're seeing that integrating the data, social, economic, and environment is very important. So it needs to be used. It's not only per se like price stability, but how it's linked to all the other areas. And this is where we have to really, put emphasis on.
That's thanks for the comment. Let's go to Yusuf and then Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, and I think for that presentation. And just I have one question that's about the capacity building. I think the revolution of change in the data sources and also the change in the methodology in somehow maybe for some indicators. I think for this we have to have maybe global plan to how we can improve our capacity building among all the statistical office. You know, still in most of the among all the statistical office, still the people maybe have a medium experience in average, but for those the evolution in maybe sometime, let's say for national account, as we heard, that some countries start to use some revised. Maybe they need more advanced experience. And so, is there any plan to share like this experience, let's say for direct to the statistic office, or also or by the regional office? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I think certainly the network has perhaps a role to play, as Daniela said, in capacity building. But I think broader solutions are required. So we'll have to sort of think about that and work with Stefan to see how we can sort of help deliver that. There's a few other questions as we move to our second question in the poll. So please enter your responses as soon as you can. Let's go to Jackie. And then Joe.
Thank you. So just in relation to the Global South initiatives, which I really appreciate the work that you've been undertaking, I think it's just also a recognition that there are countries within the particular regions that are already providing support to countries in the Global South, and I think there should be some engagement with that. So if I just give an example, in Australia, through our Foreign Affairs Agency, we have a programme with various countries in the region. I'm the exec sponsor for our relationship with the BPS, so Statistics Indonesia. So I think it would be good if we could have some engagement with those countries so that we can collaborate rather than kind of either flood the market or maybe end up having kind of lots of patches and big holes. Thank you.
That's some solid advice. Thank you. For sure, we'll think about that. Joe, perhaps you get the last question.
Thank you very much. I better make it a good one then. Just a comment, and good afternoon, everybody. I mean, the Global South is a big place, so it's very difficult to make a slide that sort of represents all the different interests. And I mean, I'm just sitting here from my space. It's easy to come up with a grocery list of things that you want to get involved with or things you want to improve. But to get a priority list out of that is very tricky. Mm-hmm. So we need to also encourage the countries that are asking for support to be very much self-critical so that they're able to absorb the support that they are being given. And as we go through these multiple choice or multiple option questions at the moment, it's tough for me not to tick all of these boxes, because all of these things has a stakeholder community that says these are important. But if Stats SA was offered support in all these topics, we wouldn't be able to take all the support. So a couple of tough choices needs to be made. And hopefully our counterparts in the Global South will take a pragmatic view of it and try not to be everything to everybody. Thank you.
Again, Joe, that was a really important comment. And that's the challenge that we have as a network and as a bureau. So what do we focus on, and how can we best leverage our expertise and limited capabilities, I would say. So yeah, thank you for that comment. So I don't see any other hands, although there are a few legacy hands there. Jackie, you still have your hand up, and Wafa as well. I don't know if you wanted to jump in again. Joe, I see your hand is up again. Did you want to jump back in? Nope.
Sorry, I'm trying to get it off here.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes the buttons are tricky. So look, we're gonna have to sort of wrap up. I think you know, in terms of the Slido poll, in terms of question one, big data, you know, was by far well, the top big data and data integration was the top you know, comment question, followed by the data integration. Question two, it was really about economic growth and the environment. Those were the leading categories. There we go, 89%, 78%. But as Joe said, I think, all these topics are important, but clearly in this group, it's the economic growth one that comes up. And again, question 3, we have facilitating sharing is coming up at 44%, and of course, assisting in modernization of national statistics at 33%. So I think this gives us a general idea of what people in this meeting certainly think. We'll take that back as a network and as a bureau, and try to frame that into our work plan for the future. Certainly, if you have other comments on priorities, you know how to reach us. You can reach us directly, indirectly, through the website and so on. But I think for now, I'll thank all the presenters today. I think we've had a good meeting. Again, too short, perhaps. But nevertheless, I think it was a good meeting. I don't know if Stefan, you want to jump in with any last words. Otherwise, I think we'll just wrap up.
No, just as you said, to thank everybody for the participation. There's a lot of material on the table. I mean, this is really just the beginning. I think I was very inspired by many things that were said, and looking at these results, I think we have also some real meat on the table that we can work on and build on, and that makes me very excited for the future. So thank you for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you, Stefan. So everybody, thank you for your participation. And we'll see you at the next GDP Beyond GDP sprint, or the classification sprint, or our next quarterly event. So stay in touch. And again, if you have any comments, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, and have a good day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.